So, thank you. Hello, dear friends. My name is Inessa. Welcome to this session, which is on multidisciplinary approaches to community development. I'm very delighted that you came here to this presentation. Before we start, just a couple of words. Dear colleagues, many of our participants are from Ukraine. They are based in the war zone or they are refugees in different countries. It might be very difficult for them to join the sessions, and moreover, we have participants from 59 countries, and it is impossible for everyone to participate in all sessions because of the different time zone. That is why it is very important for us to make the record of the session for our colleagues. It turns out that this presentation is not just for people here in this room, but for many people who would like to know about this experience, but don't have the chance to connect right now. So if you, for some reasons, do not want to be on the record, please switch off your camera. Here is the format of our session. It will last an hour and a half. I will keep an eye on time. Today we will have 3 presentations. It will last 3 presentations. We have not more than 15 minutes to each, because then we want to open the discussion. Dear friends, I would like to tell that all of you here are experts. All of you here are experts, and some of you may know more about this topic than the speaker. So we want you to share your experience as well. So feel free to open up the microphone during the discussion time. So we are here for discussion. We are here for practice exchange, for exchange of our experience. Okay, we're ready to start, and I want to give the floor to our first speaker, Charlie Mcconnell from the United Kingdom. Charlie was the head of community development for the Scottish government. He has worked with the Council of Europe and advising municipalities and the region to promote community development, and has held a range of senior governmental and foundational posts. So Charlie, I'm giving you the floor with your presentation.
Okay, meeting passcode is opened over here now, probably.
I'm so relieved. That is my colleagues, Kalyan and Anita Paul, and I've been trying to get the Zoom connection through to them. So hello, everybody, and a big sigh of relief from me, I have to say, because the best part of our presentation is from Kalyan and Anita, not from me. So I'm going to, what the three of us are going to be talking about is the whole issue of the whole approach, the holistic community development approach, and why we would advise agencies, governmental, non-governmental, to take a holistic approach to trying to address some of the challenges and issues that disadvantaged and vulnerable communities face. So I'll just, obviously the first slide, which Inessa will kindly put up, is going to be talking about the title of the holistic approach. It'll be up in a second. And then just goes maybe from that to the second slide. Thank you, Inessa. That's us, that's development practitioners. First engaging within a community, and my apologies to all the communities that we work with. They're, of course, not trees. However, we have learnt a lot over decades from the social sciences and from the ecological sciences that people's problems, the challenges they face in their life, are not in little silos. They are not separate issues, separate problems. There is an interrelationship. If you are poor, your housing is going to be the worst housing. Your health care is going to be the worst. In fact, your health is going to be worse than the rest. Your educational opportunities and attainment levels will be lower. You will have a poverty of influence over the political system. There will be a whole range of multiple problems that face vulnerable and disadvantaged communities. And therefore, when we first look, we need to keep that. That needs to be our mindset as development practitioners. We need to see the wood for the trees as we come and engage within communities. Now, this may seem really obvious to you all, but of course, many agencies, most agencies are siloed agencies. They're concerned with housing, or they're concerned with health, or they're concerned with education, whatever. Or the environment, greening of the environment, or whatever. So whatever part of community development that you come from, whether your specialism is in environmental work, cultural work, social work, health work, educational work, whatever, we need to be fully aware of the dangers of silo thinking and the dangers, therefore, of seeing problems in a siloed way. It is really important that we're seeing the wood for the trees. Now, if you're from a more generalist agency and you have maybe you work for a municipality, or perhaps you work for a donor that is just allowing you to take a broad sweep to go into a community and to actually try and help a community become more empowered and to develop socially, economically, environmentally, then hopefully you would already have that mindset of seeing the wood for the trees. But what we're saying is to all of us, we need to think in that way. If the immediate issue you're looking at is a health issue, and you think of it in a sort of medical model of health, or or even a preventive model of health, you would then look, for example, at the environmental context in which the people live, in urban areas or in rural areas. Are the houses damp? Are the houses of such a poor standard? Is there pollution in the area? There is a wider context in which that person or that community's ill health is occurring. As I say, what we've found, what ecologists have found, is that there are interconnections between things, between humans and nature and different parts of nature. What social scientists have found over and over again, that there are these connections, and we need to look for these connections as we try and understand the issues and the concerns and the problems people face. We also need to be minded that you cannot just assume that indigenous wisdom can see the wood for the trees. Often it can't. Often, because of the poverty and the degradation and the disempowerment, people just don't see the wood for the trees. They're just surviving. It is our role as development practitioners and agencies to help people make those connections. Paulo Freire, a great Brazilian adult educator who has influenced our field, spoke about raising the consciousness of people, raising the awareness of people to try to see the wood for the trees, to make the connections. Why am I disadvantaged? Why am I depressed? Is it my problem, or is it something wider? And you've heard from many speakers in the conference already, one needs to look at systemic problems, the racism within society, bureaucracies, etc., the police or whatever. And we need to look at structural causes. Is it something to do with the social class system, the inequalities between the rich and their lifestyle and opportunities and those who are disadvantaged? So that's why I'm saying again and again, we need to look for the wood to the trees. Now, if we look at just the third slide very briefly, which is the Sustainable Development Goals, which I'm sure you are all familiar with. Inessa, could we just show slide number 3? Now, we often look at these goals as 17 separate goals. And in a way, that has been a bit of maybe a marketing and communication mistake on behalf of the United Nations and the UNDP. Because what I'm saying, and what social scientists and the ecological scientists are saying, is that in each of these goals, there is an interrelationship between them. So if you're looking at reducing inequalities, you're maybe also looking at clean water and sanitation, or you're looking at health. These are not siloed development goals. We need to look at the interrelationships. Now, all of this, I'm sure to all of you, seems absolutely self-evidently obvious, but we don't do it anywhere near as much, because when we work for specialist agencies, and maybe when we come from a particular discipline, although we're using a community development approach, we've been trained in that other discipline as an architect or as a health worker to often just look at issues through the prism of our professional education and training. So this is why a holistic approach, we would argue, makes a lot of sense. It is about not just assuming that the first range of issues you see are actually the ones that you need to be tackling and dealing with. Now, there's a downside to the holistic approach. Sometimes seeing the wood for the trees, it seems just insurmountable. So it is better, one would feel, just to go in on one issue and try and deal with one set of problems. But of course, you're not going to just get health improvements if you cannot also deal with gender equality, or if you cannot also deal with sustainable cities and the mega cities and the slum dwelling that so many people on our planet live within. So yes, there's the advantage of just taking a siloed approach, is that it seems to be focused, it seems to be clear, it's what my agency is about. But what I'm arguing, and we will see soon in Kalyan's film, is try and see the wood for the trees. If you're there intervening as a development agency with a specialism, find out what the other development agencies are doing and seeing if you can take a multidisciplinary approach, work together collaboratively with the communities that we're all there to serve. So I'm now going to hand over, that's just setting out the principles, but I'm now going to hand over to Kalyan, Paul from India, and maybe Anita, Paul as well, who will talk about their work in applying the holistic approach in northern India. So may I pass over to you, Kalyan? We have a short film to show of your work, but I'll go on mute and hand over to you.
Okay. Thank you, WCDC organizers and Charlie. I think Charlie's made a fantastic beginning to lay out the what do you call, the current scenario for the last few decades about the development sector and community development specifically, and what ails it and what are the problems really with it. And we could speak a little bit about it based on our experience in the mountains for last almost 4 decades. But would you like to first just show a snippet of that grassroots film to begin with? Yep. Okay. I think, are you, who is
It's just coming. Inessa from Virtual WCDC is doing it.
Okay.
Yeah, 1 second, please.
We formed Grassroots in 1992, but we started living in the mountains since 1987. And those initial years, actually, we just walked and talked with mountain communities, because We had never lived in mountain communities. We didn't know what the issues were. But then to get a nice exposure on what the challenges are for these mountain communities, we spent a lot of time just interacting. Based on these conversations, we kind of had a little bit of an idea that we wanted to do sustainable mountain development. And that led us to kind of initiating a holistic plan aimed at improving the quality of life for these people here, and also address some of the challenges that are important to be looked at in the long term.
By far the biggest problem people were facing, communities were facing when we came here in 92, we did a survey of 60 villages over here, and it came out as the top priority was the drinking water crisis. People had shortage of drinking water to the extent that almost 70% of the nalas, the natural, the traditional water sources, they had dried up. So people had a huge crisis regarding drinking water.
वो नदी से लाते थे हम पानी, उधर नदी से लाते थे, उधर दूर से पानी लाते थे पहले, इधर दूर नदी से लाते थे पानी, मिट्टी के घड़े होते थे। अब तो हम ये पीतल का गगरी रखे हैं, नहीं तो मिट्टी के होते थे। घर आने तो ये भी फिसल जाता था, वो पानी भी गया हमारा घर आते आते, तो और भी रोने का मन हो जाता था। फिर दूसरी बार फिर जाना पड़ता था मिट्टी का घड़े लेके। 4 घड़े सुबह 4 या शाम को लाकर भी कुछ नहीं होता था हमारा।
We believe that to improve quality of life, there has to be some technological input, some changes have to be brought in. It can't be business as usual. Appropriate technology means something which can be managed by people. It's small, it's appropriate, could be implemented easily and handed over to the communities to be able to take it forward and sustain in the future.
We came across this gentleman called Dr. Tim Rees. So he was a geohydrologist, and Dr. Rees conceptualized, designed and trained people like us on how to build an infiltration well in the mountains. And so it's a classical takeoff of the traditional Nala with his technical knowledge. We started making these infiltration wells so we could get enhanced quantities of safe drinking water, and grassroots actually started becoming popular with the communities because of this appropriate technology.
और जहाँ तक पहले की बात है तो हम आपके तो आप ग्रेटफुल है सर, आपके तो आभारी हैं सर। आपने पानी पिलाया हमको, यहाँ हम बहुत प्रॉब्लम थी, यहाँ वाटर की प्रॉब्लम थी ना, तो आप आए यहाँ सम्मिलित हुए तो योजना बनी और लिफ्ट आज ये है सर। 98 पानी आ गया था।
बहुत ही सुविधा हो गई है अब। सबसे ज़्यादा पानी चाहिए, पानी पहले। तो अब हमने शहर में लाना ना बर्तन भरना, 1-2 वो बोतल भर दिए, सुबह शाम पानी आ जाता है। फिर सुबह शाम ही चाहिए हमको पीने के लिए पानी और खाना बनाने के लिए, और दिन में स्टॉक वो ठहरा फ्रंट में। तो अब कितने बार पानी आता है, इतनी सुविधा हो गई, और क्या चाहिए हमको।
Because the vegetal cover in this river basin and in many others were changed during the colonial times, which was predominantly the oaks, okay, which is a broad-leaved evergreen tree over here. But during the colonial era, because of the exploitation and removal of the oaks, what has happened is now 80-90% of the landscape, is filled with pine trees.
पत्ता झड़नी उसका, पात झड़नी नो, हम पहली बार गोरू बिसोची गोरू मूल, तब चाहिए हमको। अब क्या चाहिए, आप लकड़ा काटना चाहिए, अब नीचे पिरू हिरू। चीड़ है पहली बेटी, या जंगल तो आप बना जब 7 जुड़ा।
जंगल बनाने के लिए पानी की सुविधा, बारिश नहीं हो रही, बारिश हो जाएगी, इस वजह से जंगल का वो किया। 5-6 में तो समूह बना, 6-7 में हमारा गधेड़ा बचाओ समिति बनी। पेड़ की बहुत ही प्रजातियां हैं इसमें, बांज, बुरांश और बहुत चीज़ हैं इसमें। ये पेड़ लगाने के लिए जो पर्यावरण के लिए या पानी के लिए, और इसमें खाल चाल बने हैं बहुत, उसमें नौलों की, उसके लिए गधेरों में पानी बढ़ाने के लिए, इसके लिए ये का वो किया गया पेड़ पौधों का।
पेड़ लगाना ये आबहवा के लिए हमें ये संस्था के द्वारा कहा गया। क्यों लगाया? आबहवा अच्छी होती है, कुछ हमारे बाद में बच्चों के लिए अच्छा हो जाएगा, और आबहवा अच्छी आती है, हवा आती है पानी रुकने के लिए। हमने कहा हमारे खेतों तक नमी आएगी।
So what the oaks do is, because they've got a wide canopy, so when the rain falls, so it helps it, reduce the kinetic energy of the rain, and it helps in renewing the hydrology because it allows the seepage of the water, unlike the pine trees. Okay, thank you. Shall I resume? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, so thanks a lot. That was a nice beginning of the kind of work which we do, in the mountains. Now, before I really make a 5-minute sort of presentation about the nature of the holistic program, how we develop, let me just say a couple of things about what the situation is like and why it's like that, and why society at large fails to understand the need for holistic community development practices. You see, governments all over the planet, governments everywhere, they're intrinsically being administered by departments and by ministries which operate in silos. Okay. And knowing that, the non-profit sector, the so-called voluntary organizations, they came out largely in the 60s and 70s in the last century, and created programs which were more holistic. So it used to be called integrated rural development programs. The word integrated was very important in any development policy making. And even in countries like India, there was actually a definition called integrated rural development programs. But unfortunately, what happened is the governments were stumbling with the idea of not being able to integrate various programs. And fortunately for the government, and unfortunately for the communities, by the late 80s, most of the development money started coming through international bilateral aid programs. And these aid programs and the World Bank aid programs, they really took over the development sector and said that programs can only be supported directly by the government. And so the voluntary agencies, the non-profits, they sort of took a back seat and they were sort of neglected. And when you neglect the non-profit sector, what really happened is that the fundamental principle of holistic development processes, it got ignored. And it got ignored and it got reinforced because the governments, by and large, as I said a minute ago, they are just intrinsically, they are only known to operate in silos. And so therefore you have what Charlie mentioned about the SDGs. Look, there's nothing wrong with the SDGs. They had to be defined, so they've defined all the SDGs, from clean drinking water, access to energy, etc., etc. But what the governments fail to realize is that all of them are intricately linked with each other if you really want to make a change in the lives of the people. For example, in the grassroots experience, as the film points out, the entry point for the communities where we were working was really to do with drinking water, because that was the crisis which the community was facing, right? And so once we, sort of started the dialogue with the community with something which was so important for them, the drinking water program. And so therefore, the community was willing to listen to us because we could sort of assist them with the immediate crisis in their lives. And so when we said that, hey, you need to add on an environmental sanitation component onto this program, because you got to cut off the link between E. coli, contamination of drinking water, shallow water capillaries, and the health and hygiene of the community. They understood that. And so they invested money in, installing water sealed toilets. So we had a drinking water program and it got clubbed with the sanitation program. Now, once both these two programs got clubbed together, and so we proposed a third one, saying that, look, you need to sustain this water supply program now. So for which you need to look into the state of your catchment area to recharge the hydrology in a sustainable way. So that is how the whole tree planting program started, the third element. And so there were little village nurseries set up by the women in the villages. And they started, raising saplings of native species and planting it on the wasted hill slopes. And so you had a third element of development, linked with the water component, which started the program. And then now from water to sanitation to, trees, right? And then there was already an immense biotic pressure on the forests regarding bringing out the firewood, which people needed to cook their food, you see. And as there's a sustainable development goal to provide clean cooking energy, access to clean cooking energy. So we introduced appropriate technology in the terms of a biogas digester. Some of you may know about it. So you just push in, some amount of cow dung mixed with water every day, and you get 4 hours of clean cooking gas. So we had a fourth element, in terms of providing clean cooking energy into the same communities. And then finally, once the quality of life improving with access to clean water, sanitation, sustainable, the sustainability of native forests, and also the renewable energy, people want to improve their quality of life and then move on with improving the economics in their lives. Because as you know, even the most remote mountain communities are now linked with the larger, regional and national and international economies. And so our livelihood programs had to be started. And so for which the poor people, the villagers, they just lack social capital, to invest in a livelihood program, to invest in a business, you need capital. So we started encouraging them to make small savings. And those small savings have now led to, a bank of their own, so to speak, with a couple of $1 million worth of their own money. And so now the farmers were enabled and empowered, rather, to set up their own company, where they could process and add value to some of their local farm produce, be it the soft apricots, we turn it into apricot jam, or be it their other millets and amaranthus and other safe, what you call superfoods now in the Western world, right? And so we started a whole gamut of activities which led to building sustainable supply chains, value chains from the farm gate to the urban communities in terms of storing, processing, packaging, marketing, so that's how the livelihood business has started. And so anyway, it's a long story, but to just cut it short, what I meant was that while Grassroots as an organization started with a community drinking water program, but look where we are finally. There are a whole lot of gamut of elements which together make up a holistic program. Now, sadly, the government departments, they can either look at water, or they can look at sanitation, or they can look at livelihood, but they sort of fail to look at the whole program as community development practitioners are able to do. And we are actually able to do that, not due to some magic. We are able to do that because we are trained as professional community development practitioners. So what I feel is that you need more and more schools of social work and more schools of community development practitioners, where you got to bring in the government officials, you got to bring in the World Bank people and enable them to understand what it takes to sort of practice holistic community development. I hand it over to Charlie, Charlie?
That's us. Yeah, that's us now, because there are other presenters. I know, I don't know how Inessa wants to take questions, but Thank you very much. Thank you, Kalyan.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Kalyan. Thank you, Charlie, for this presentation. Today we will have 3 presenters, and then we'll have the discussion. But we have the second digital platform of our conference, the Discord platform. Of course, the session has a time limit, and we have a lot to talk. We have a lot to discuss. And that is very cool, and that is great that we have this opportunity to come to Discord, and there is no time limits over there. And when the conference will over, the 3 official days of the conference, we will have 3 days of practice exchange. And even then after the 3 days of practice exchange, we have no reasons to disconnect. So we will stay there and we'll discuss all important questions over there. So, and now, dear colleagues, I would like to ask our second presenter, Busisiwe Luchabe, a postdoctoral fellow at the Nelson Mandela University in South Africa, a faculty of humanities and social science. You are the second presenter today, and shall we start with a short video, right, Busisiwe?
Yes.
And dear friends, please check that your microphones are mute during the presentations. Thank you.
Greetings to everyone. My name is Busisiwe Luchabe. I'm a postdoc fellow in Nelson Mandela University in Port Elizabeth, Eastern Cape, South Africa. I'm part of a team working with a community-based organization called Izansake Community Building Program, together with a group of non-academic stakeholders from non-governmental organizations and academic stakeholders of Nelson Mandela postgraduate students who are committed to contribute towards solutions of addressing household food insecurity in a South African community. This presentation introduces an example of the application of a community-based participatory action and transdisciplinary research approach towards the co-designing of pathways to improve household food security in a South African community of Wells Estate, which is situated in Ward 60 of the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality in the Eastern Cape in South Africa. The choice of Wells Estate was motivated by the fact that my place of residence is also in Ward 60, which is Bluewater Bay, adjacent to Wells Estate. Bluewater Bay appears to be an affluent suburban area, whereas Wells Estate is a low-income human settlement township that was planned to accommodate informal settlement dwellers who were relocated from various areas in the city of Port Elizabeth. Wells Estate is a human settlement area consisting of people who are benefiting from the government low-income housing and social welfare grant system. Whilst everyone is looking for a job, there are very few that are able to find jobs. Some generate income through small-scale food businesses. The greatest challenge of Wells Estate is joblessness. It has been very disheartening to see young and old male residents from Wells Estate roaming the streets of Bluewater Bay, searching garbage bags for food and begging for food or looking for cheap labor that could afford the money to put food on their table. As a researcher and a qualified social worker committed to social justice, I'm deeply challenged by these inhuman observations, which are a consequence of the social injustices and a reflection of deep structural inequalities inherent in our society. My response was to relocate to Wells Estate to understand the situation closer and to do a situational analysis. My move to the community of Wells Estate was inspired by my deep commitment to social justice and community transformation, as well as by the words of a 20th century educator who said, "Go to the people and live among them, learn from them and love them, serve them, blend with them, start with what they know and build with what they have." That is Dr. James Yen. Relocating afforded me with the opportunity to be in close contact and to connect with the community in order to do a situational analysis. The situational analysis involved observing and listening to the stories of residents. The words, "many households go to sleep without food," became the common expression of most residents. The situational analysis culminated into ultimately establishing a neighborhood team with a group of residents who were passionate about sharing their meals with others that did not have. Having connected with the neighborhood team, we established an entity. We voiced concerns around the community. We also used an asset-based community development approach to co-create a common vision with short, medium, long-term goals, as well as to map individual group assets so as to start with what we know and what we had. That is, we had to look for low-hanging fruits. We also identified research approaches that we should use. The common felt need was that many households go to sleep without food. In terms of the co-created vision, it came out to be that the community would love to see food secure, productive, and self-sustainable households. We had to draw short-term goals. We identified a soup kitchen, food gardens, skills development, and other income-generating projects which could assist household members to become self-sustainable. The medium-term goals was to conduct a household survey to explore the household food security status, and the long-term objectives were to ensure that every household was productive and food secure and self-sufficient. There are great approaches to use for research were a community-based participatory action research approach and a transdisciplinary research approach. I will start with the community-based participatory approach. This was chosen because it allows partnerships between the community members, the organizational representatives, and researchers in all the research process. The difference between a traditional traditional research and community-based participatory research is that in traditional research, the community is passive, whereas in CBPR, it involves the community being studied in the research. The research design in traditional research is done by where the priority is often by the academic institution, whereas with CBPR, research design is done by representatives from communities and the academic institution. Also, in terms of CBPR, sustainability is a priority that begins at the program's inception. So it is a collaborative approach to research, and it is a method, but not an orientation. It is not a method, but an orientation to research that says no research about us without us in terms of the community. The community-based participatory research approach guided the study to embark on the following phases. Phase 1, which was problem identification. Phase 2, designing solutions. And phase 3, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. In terms of phase 1, we started with the first step of problem identification as our first phase. The situational analysis, which led us to the felt need, many households go to sleep without food, became our hypothesis and informed us to conduct an evidence-based exploration of the problem so as to come up with evidence-based solutions. So the research aim for our phase 1, we sought to find out what is the current status of household food security in Ward 60 and what is the association between the demographic and socioeconomic variables of a household and its level of food security. We wanted also to explore what capacities and skills do households have. In terms of our methodology, we used a household survey design, which is a quantitative methodological approach, and we also used a skills audit to find out the skills of household members. We trained the community residents that were participating as the neighborhood team as field workers. The results of phase 1 from a sample size of 170 randomly selected households gave us the following results. only 6.1% of households were food secure. 3.5% were mildly food insecure, 13.4% as moderately food insecure, and 77.4% as severely food insecure. The results also showed a significant unemployment rate of 82.4%, and 80% reliance on social grants, and 47.6% absence of income, which seriously impact on the extent of household food insecurity. The results also suggested that gender, household size, age, employment, and household income influence household food security. The household skills results showed that the household had a variety of skills. We then had to proceed to phase 2 of our research, which was designing solutions. And the aim of phase 2 of the study was to explore how the household food security situation in Wells Estate can be enhanced using a CBPR approach and a transdisciplinary case study approach. The objectives were to enter into a participatory collaborative process of engaging a number of stakeholders from a variety of academic and non-academic disciplines to explore and describe appropriate transdisciplinary perspectives and pathways to address household food security, as well as to explore and design a transdisciplinary intervention program to be implemented to improve household food security in Wells Estate. So the main research question was, how can the household food security situation at Wells Estate be improved or enhanced? And for phase 2, we concentrated on the transdisciplinary research approach. A transdisciplinary research approach is research that integrates knowledge across academic disciplines with non-academic stakeholders to address societal challenges. Societal impact is also the end goal of transdisciplinary research, to contribute to the development of society and to challenges facing society. So the transdisciplinary research process has got 3 steps. The first step is establishing a team. We had a meeting with separate sample groups: postgraduate students, Ward 60 stakeholders, and community residents. We had a meeting where all stakeholders were invited to attend a second meeting in order to collaborate and establish a transdisciplinary team towards participatory planning. The transdisciplinary meeting was followed by a workshop. So a second step of transdisciplinary process is framing and analyzing the problem. All stakeholders, academic and non-academic, attended a stakeholder engagement workshop to share the results of the household survey and to enter into a participatory process. Firstly, the academic stakeholders were afforded an opportunity to make presentations on their food security related research findings from the research they have undertaken, and the other non-academic holders also made presentations on their involvement in promoting food security. All the stakeholders had equally important contributions that created mutual learning regarding their areas of expertise about food security. The following stage was exploring solutions and impacts. All the stakeholders were divided into 3 sample groups to participate in focus group discussions. Sample A consisting of academic stakeholders, and sample B consisting of non-academic stakeholders, and sample 3 consisting of community residents, to answer the question of how can the household food security in Wells Estate be enhanced so as to co-design an appropriate intervention food security program for implementation. From the transdisciplinary perspectives of the various stakeholders and the community, the following pathways were identified: food relief assistance, agricultural production, promotion of livelihoods, income generation and job creation, development of human assets, resources mobilization, social capital and partnerships, stakeholder philanthropy and cooperativeness, land use and availability. Also, there were possible solutions that were identified to address the problem. In conclusion, achieving food security cannot be addressed with single disciplinary top-down approaches alone. Food insecurity is a societal challenge that is highly interconnected to other challenges, such as poverty and unemployment. Hence, it is a multidimensional phenomenon that requires a transdisciplinary multi-stakeholder collaborative process. The application of transdisciplinarity and community-based participatory collaborative processes provide an opportunity for program effectiveness and have important implications for intervention sustainability and appropriateness. I thank you very much, and I would welcome all forms of questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Lucy Siva, that was the second presenter of our session. Maybe briefly, it's very short, you will add something to conclude, and then we will have time during the discussion to discuss the presentations. Okay?
Okay, thank you very much, Ineza. Sorry for the sound. I'm not sure what happened to the sound. It was not very clear. But I think the gist of the presentation, it is showing an application of a transdisciplinary and a community-based participatory action research approach in answering a question of how can we improve household food security in a poverty-stricken or food insecure or severely food insecure community. So it's describing the application of those approaches and the processes that we went through in terms of going to the community and ensuring that the processes were community-driven, knowing what the co-crafting the vision with the community and enabling the community to be able to say exactly what is the problem, what is their felt need, and also involving the community and other stakeholders in co-creating the solutions. So the transdisciplinarity is showing the involvement of the stakeholders, non-academic and academic stakeholders, including the community, in the process, in a collaborative process of designing solutions to improve household food security in that community of Wells Estate. So that is just the process that it is taking, and we needed to identify the pathways that we're going to take, and the pathways would inform the implementation of a food security program that would be implemented in the community. So it is a process that is ongoing. We've got academic stakeholders from Nelson Mandela. We've got NGOs that are operating in the area, and we also have the community. So we have that collaboration of the stakeholders in terms of taking the process forward. As you have seen, that the transdisciplinary or the community-based participatory action research, it has got certain steps in terms of identifying the problem, and number two, designing solutions and implementing solutions. So we had to start with the first phase, that is identifying the problem. And that is where we used a household survey, household food security survey, to really understand, to have an evidence-based analysis of the problem. And we're able to gather that indeed the community was only having 6.1 households that were food secure, and almost 70% of the households were food insecure. So that's why we had to go into the second phase of now designing the solutions in terms of what is it then that we could do. So we had to enter into that collaborative process to design the solutions, and we came up with the pathways. And now in terms of the pathways, they're going to inform the program. We're going to make up an action plan in terms of implementing all those pathways. We're in that process now of beginning to implement the pathways as the transdisciplinary team. So what one was trying to show is that single disciplinary approaches, are not quite effective in solving the kind of problems that communities are facing. But it is very important that we have community-based participation, community-driven participation, community-based participatory action that will actually drive the process. And we need a multidisciplinary approach, a transdisciplinary approach across the board of those experts and the community, as well as those who can also bring the type of resources to assist the households to get into the place where they have to be. I think that's the summary.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bususiwa, for your passion, for your experience. Dear friends, thank you for all your messages in chat. We already have questions. We will keep an eye on them, and then during the discussion, you will have the chance to open up the microphones and ask our speakers. So we will have time for discussion. And now, I just wanted to know that, Bususiwa, don't worry, the sound was good and everything was clear with the sound, so don't worry. But we already have the request for the video, for the link of the video. So if you have the link, so just put it in chat, because our participants want to review your experience one more time. Okay, thank you. And we are ready to proceed. And our third presentation from Kenya, Dr. Mary Magud, Senior Lecturer at School of Human and Social Sciences, Department of Development student. Please proceed with your co-presenters.
Thank you very much for according us this opportunity to also share with you our research and the findings that we came with from what we've been looking at. I am with my two colleagues, Daniel and Jen, and we come from Digester University, Kenya. And our paper today that we want to share with you, just in tandem with the two presenters who have gone ahead of us, is entitled The Participatory Approaches for Reduction of Food Insecurity Risks Among Marginalized and Vulnerable Communities in Kenya. To start us off, I want to invite Daniel, who will take the first part of our presentation. Daniel.
Thank you, my colleague Mary, and I'm privileged to be part of this team and our group, and also participate in this presentation. Thank you for the presenters who have gone before us. Ours is about the approaches that can reduce food insecurity risks in communities. And we note from literature that food security has been a subject of discussion as far back as the First World War. And we also note that from literature, communities need food to be secure. if they are to thrive in all dimensions of their life. One of the UN organizations, Food Agricultural Organization, observes that food insecurity entails poor access to adequate, safe, and nutritious food for normal growth, development, active, and a healthy life. And food insecurity can be looked at in different levels, or it can occur at 3 different levels. There's one that is, acute level, where it can cause imminent death, or it can be occasional, at a occasional level, where it is only temporary, or it occurs just temporal, it's occasional, or it can be chronic, where it is consistent. There is consistent food shortage over a long period of time, and that can be really a threat to human life. Particular aspects of food security would mean that there is adequate food to all people, all the time. It is available and economically accessible to all people. And it's also of good nutrition level, and also culturally acceptable, because, and I take concern that sometimes when organizations are involved in relief, I don't think there's major concern, or they are concerned about the culture of the people and the kind of people, the type of food they need to eat. In our country, Kenya, and we will refer to it a number of times, government and development agencies have used relief services and participatory methods to make the country food secure. There's been such a great attempt to do that. But we also know that participatory approaches provide an opportunity for community members to actively be involved in need identification, planning, and implementation of community responsive interventions. And the presenter just before us alluded to the same. The government of Kenya and the development agencies have also made provision for public participation to reduce food insecurity. However, in reality, this has remained a mirage. For your information, our constitution makes a provision for what has come to be called public participation. And it is taking place in a few counties in our country, but it has not taken root, and the results have not been really evident as it would be expected. Communities who could have been empowered to reduce food insecurity remain ill-equipped to sustainably feed themselves. And currently in Kenya, and even as we talk today, we are experiencing such a serious drought. And if the rains do not come, we have not seen the worst of it. We are currently having approximately 4 million people who are food insecure, even as we are seated in this and doing this presentation. So really quite a threat to the country. This study had one objective, which was to examine the place of participatory approaches in the reduction of food insecurity risks among marginalized and vulnerable communities in our country, that is Kenya. And the methodology we used this was mainly a desktop research. We reviewed documented literature obtained from books, journal articles, reports, and other relevant sources that examine the role of participatory approaches in reducing food insecurity in Kenya. And that is the method we used to achieve what we want to achieve through this study. Thank you.
In line with what Daniel has just shared, when we surveyed and reviewed the various documentations that show the methods, the participatory methods that have been used in Kenya, we were able to see that the methods listed in this slide were very commonly used in most parts of our country, with both the government and the NGO world, that is the public and the private sectors. They were upholding the PRA approach, the PPA, the appreciative inquiry, the participatory learning and action, the participatory action research, which our sisters just finished talking about, and the integrated development research. And of late, there has been a position where there are some players are embracing the mindset change model. So there are a number of approaches that have been used. But in spite of that, we felt that something was not working very well. If all those beautiful methods and approaches which are participatory in nature are used, we were thinking that the result could be very, very impressive. Ideally, the experts who use participatory approaches would facilitate the community members, guide them, and help them understand what needs to be done, but not necessarily telling them how things should be done. Often, community members are passive participants who are usually informed or who are participating because there is need to have a record of consultation and the participation. But their actual input in terms of the process as important, and it is not so much emphasized. And this, if this was emphasized that people could be empowered in the participatory approaches, then it is assumed that our communities, especially those who are now vulnerable and very threatened of food insecurity, they could be able to address this problem on their own because they have been facilitated through research, through empowerment, and many other ways. Those who are affected in this way with food insecurity will not only be given food aid, but will also be able to now know how to go about to produce their own food. And that means their experiences and knowledge gained will transcend the expert presence in the field. Since participatory approaches have been used by development agencies and practitioners for a number of days, then we assume that these communities which are marginalized could have shown a level of reduction of food insecurity. But as we speak now, just as Daniel has alluded, Kenya right now faces the threat of food insecurity since almost 4 million people are under threat of food insecurity. And we are wondering, since participatory approaches are used, which are meant to involve people, empower them, and help them to have food sustainability, what is the problem? And that takes us to my second slide, which wants to bring the reality on the table. What happens, as much as we speak of participatory approaches, the literature we reviewed stated that most of the experts, development agents, end up using more of bottom-up approaches to development in the name of participatory. For example, there could be just a passive involvement by show of hands. How many of you have agreed with this? And we show hands. And the people are not actually in tandem with what is going to happen or what that participatory methodology intends to do. So it is more of a bottom-up approach hidden in a participatory approach. The experts sometimes fail to incorporate the community values and beliefs in whatever they bring on board to help the people deal with the food insecurity. Like, for example, the cultural aspect is left out, and it is like people are expected to adopt whatever needs to be adopted, which is a solution to food insecurity, but it is not compatible with what they believe in, like the kind of food that we need to have. Like, for example, if you go to the northeastern part of Kenya, which is now hit seriously with the drought and famine, they are a pastoralist in nature. When you go there as an expert, it means that you need to look at them from the pastoralist perspective. But when our experts will go there, they have a different view, and that does not augur very well with the people. Sometimes demeaning their wisdom of ages, that those communities have their ways of doing things, which have carried them from the past to the present where they are. We need to borrow from them and help them build on what is already known. The historical perspective of dealing with the food insecurity issues, because we are assuming that food insecurity is not a recent thing, and there has been ways and means they have been managing this food insecurity. Can we learn from them so that we can build on their wisdom, on their historical ways of solving the problem as we blend with the modern and the technological ways of dealing with food insecurity? Inability to consider communities' knowledge and experiences, most often where success has not been recorded, has led to miserable failure. Participatory approaches have been used, but there's nothing to show that indeed the practitioners were on the field and they have used the participatory approaches, as opposed to what our colleagues have gone ahead and shown us, water running in a mountain, and probably people are able to use green energy. In our case in Kenya, sometimes we have nothing to show. Instead, the plight of poverty continues to bite even harder, and food insecurity becomes a really something which is really evident. The reality of it all is that if we have to use community participatory approaches to attain food insecurity, then we have to use approaches that brings meaningfully the people on board. There are examples that have tried that. Projects which have tried to bring people on board, engage them meaningfully, empower them meaningfully, and indeed those few communities in Kenya are examples of how participatory approaches to food insecurity can work. One of them being what we call the Christian Impact Mission, which is done in a small place in the hottest part of northeastern Kenya called Yatta. And in this place, people have been empowered by the facilitators to take responsibility, just like the presenter from South Africa did say. And the people are the ones running the show. They are doing research needs assessment, they are planning, they are implementing, they are evaluating. And in this community, small as it is, there is tremendous success of food security using participatory approaches. However, majority of the places or communities where participatory approaches have been used by the government, the Kenyan government, and some other development partners, still the situation is not desirable at all. And today as we speak, 23 counties in Kenya where there is presence of government and a non-government organization using participatory approaches are food insecure. And this has been actually what is being said in our media houses. It has even been broadcasted in CNN the last 3 weeks. So it is a reality at hand. We cannot hide from it. We cannot run away from it. Food insecurity is real. Kenya has got only 47 counties, and 23 of them are food insecure. That is almost half. Participatory approaches experts and practitioners have maintained, unfortunately, the traditional perspective that communities do not know. they feel that there's the apathy of the community people. There's the unwillingness for them to do things the way they are supposed to do them in order to learn and get out of food insecurity. So to help them, they rush there with food aid and they do quick fixes of help that leave food security unsustainable. So as we speak today, food insecurity is glaring into us, and it is not the rich, it is not the poor, especially because of the inflation and the poor economy after COVID pandemic and the war in Ukraine and all. Things are very, very bad to all the classes in the community of Kenya. And we are here asking, what should be the way forward? How should we tackle this so that the field presence of NGOs, government offices can make a difference which is sustainable and lasting? My colleague Jen will take us through that last bit.
Thank you, Mary, and our colleague Daniel. As we have given you the background in terms of the situation here in Kenya, and that is what prompted us to want to look at what is not being done in the aspects of food insecurity, and what approaches, or rather the participatory approaches that are not being used, or if they are being used, they are not being used well. So we have we are proposing the way forward in terms of looking at that participatory approaches must utilize community richness of knowledge, analytical capabilities, and creativity to solve the community problems, because the community themselves have or understand what is happening in their community, or rather they have gone through the experiences and they have got richness of knowledge in the situations that they are going through. So we are proposing as a way forward that participatory approaches must utilize this community richness of knowledge so that we can be able to move forward. We are also suggesting that marginalized communities are, or rather there are perceptions that suggest that marginalized communities are incapable of reducing food insecurity threats, which basically they are limiting. This idea or this perception is limiting. Therefore, it is important to do the following. Number one, which we are proposing, is that we need the participatory approaches should be able to help us to be able to conduct an in-depth analysis and evaluation of to establish what makes participatory approaches fail to mitigate food insecurity. Because if we are using the participatory approaches well, like the presenters who have just done, and of course my colleague Mary has said, you know, people, the government, the NGOs are running to the area to give food, which is just a quick fix. So instead of doing the quick fix, we need to do an in-depth analysis to see what is not working. Then we are also proposing that we need to address structural factors that hinder local communities' ability to apply or to come up with context-specific strategies that counter food insecurity. We are feeling that there is need for specific context to those local communities, that we are not going to generalize, so that these issues should not be generalized, but it should be context-specific strategies that will be able to counter food insecurity. Then we are also saying, we have given an example of this community that is Christian International Ministry, which they have actually used participatory approaches to bring in the community members to be able to work together and in their context and be able to come up with what is able to work in that area. And women actually who started this are the ones who are running the community. They are the ones who are running the business in the community, and they have done a lot of things. Then we are also proposing that we need to empower and also build capacities and encourage marginalized communities to be able to be in the forefront to address food insecurity themselves. We are also proposing that locals must be experts who help external facilitators. We all know that external facilitators, probably some of us who do not live in the community, we may not really understand what is going on in the community, but the community members are to help the external facilitators to understand and make compatible decisions, and also strategize or strategies that could be able to help to deal with food insecurity at the community level. And this is also what was used in this community that we're talking about, Christian International Ministry. And then there is also need for high premiums, which must be given to views and opinions of community members, that there is need to listen to the community members because they have what to say. They are the ones to change and not the development facilitators. They are the ones who are going, if we are looking for any sustainability in any projects that we begin, we need the community members to actually give their views and their opinions. Then we are also saying that facilitators need to learn local skills and gain understanding of local perspectives and situations, which is coming in or giving us partnership. And of course, the four presenters have also talked about that. And we are also proposing that decisions which will be arrived at must be responsive to values and beliefs of the targeted community, because it is important to look at what are the values and what are the beliefs of this community. And lastly, here we are also proposing that there is need to promote mindset change among community members to enhance sustainability, because if there will be no sustainability, then all the efforts that have been put will just go into the drain. And we are saying more resources also should be used to integrate experts and communities' knowledge, skills, behavioral, attitudinal capacities, and also resultant mindset change on how to mitigate food insecurity at the community. And we are coming up or winding up with this saying that if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach him how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. And so we are saying the community need to be involved, they need to participate. Thank you very much. Questions? We are ready to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mary, Daniel, Jean. Thank you. I think that now we are ready to open the discussion, and thank you for all your messages. Let me start the discussion part with some messages I want to share from chat. For example, we have a great message for Dr. Colin Powell. I will translate it. Colin Powell, the work you've done is very important and very valuable. And this is the whole system of saving lives within the community. So thank you for your experience. And also I would like to ask Sarah, Albert, who wrote the questions in chat, so you can turn on your cameras and you can turn on your microphones and just ask your question to the speakers. Yes, Sarah.
Well, we haven't got much time, and they were all very, very rich, I think, with this one dominant message about the importance of holism and really, really deep, slow participation built up over a long period with lots of collaboration and support. I suppose I'm interested in the community-based participatory research, and I'd like to ask the last two speakers if they had any comments about how easy or difficult it is to do that collaboration with universities, if the universities are prepared to work flexibly, and what they think are the real advantages for the communities of getting those research skills. Have you seen evidence of them using those research skills even when you're not there? So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Sarah. Can I respond now? Thank you very much for the question. I can say that the collaborative process is not an easy one. No, is the community-based approach easy? If you listen to the video, it had to take some relocation to stay with the community. And staying with the community is establishing relationships even before you know anything. So you become part of the community yourself with the people, and it grows from that relationship. There is trust involved. There is also understanding, the culture within the community. There's also establishing a sense of trust and also being able to identify the passions of the people. I think the advantage sometimes is when you see people who are passionate about certain things, who are like-minded, then it becomes an advantage in terms of those people being able to come together. And in terms of the universities themselves, more than picking up on the other researchers, it was great recruiting postgraduate students who had food security related research. And their research had recommendations in terms of what needs to be done. So it was putting those recommendations, inviting those postgraduate students from the various fields in terms of others came from development studies, others came from environmental health, others came from agriculture, others came from graphic design. So it was a variety of students that had that were doing research. They've never had the opportunity of interacting with communities. So for them, that was the part of the experience that was very interesting for them, to interact with the community and to see how their research could really be relevant to the communities. And it was also very much important that to them, their research was very, it was alive. It was not just for qualification. They wanted to see the relevance of their research and being able to implement the solutions and to see how they can actually empower the communities. So it's a group of students that have got the dedication in terms of sowing back to the communities they come from, the skills that they have attained. And also the communities were able to get the skills in terms of research, but more for them, it was in terms of what they were doing on the ground and what they had begun in terms of what type of support and empowerment. You hear talking about livelihoods, because for them, it was important to have food on the table. So whatever they were able, because the first research identified the skills. So the skills that they had, it was very important to see how are those skills going to be built or developed so that they can establish certain livelihoods that can give them income, and they can be able to, out of that, have a living and put food on the table. I'm not sure whether you are fully answered.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. It's very, very impressive work. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Busisiva. Albert, maybe you will answer, or you will ask your question.
Thank you. Let me just start by Let me start by confirming that Paul has already addressed my question, and I'm fully aligned with him on his response in the need to move along with the government, engaging the government in a long-term dialogue. But maybe just to paraphrase, I greatly appreciate the approach that Paul shared, starting with a simple intervention focusing on water and then developing into a very expanded and more holistic intervention, embracing sanitation, embracing environmental protection, forest cover for that matter, renewable energy, all through to a very robust livelihoods intervention. That was really encouraging. But then it reminded me of obtaining dialogue around whether we should go. And listening to Paul, I see a lot of service delivery. Then do we need to do one or do we need to do both? And what can we do to also ensure that there is more systemic change that can ensure benefits go beyond the areas that we are focusing on? And that's where I'm coming from. And I don't know whether, Paul, you have additional reflections in addition to what you have already indicated on the chat.
Dr. Kalyan, please turn on your microphone.
Okay. Thank you, Albert, for flagging this issue. If I may just add, going from the experience in India, we have one central training center for all the government officials who come there after being selected to get oriented and trained in the government policies and the way of working. They come in there as a young person, as a young woman or a young man, and then they spend something like 35 years in the bureaucracy. So I would think that that academia, where they come in for the initial 6 months training after getting selected, is where that curriculum needs to be revamped in taking into account contemporary situations. And if we could have continuous programs with the government regarding orientation of government officials and have some meaningful, like, let me give you a simple example. Like, if the World Bank or somebody is leading a water sector reform program, right, which is needed in India and in many countries, then we sort of worked with the World Bank to say that, hey, look, you need to add the forestry component onto it for sustainable supplies of water. So you need the catchment area treatment budget to be part of the drinking water supply program budget. So initially the engineers in the water sector, they could not understand that how trees were important for supply of water, because they would think that you only need pipes or pumps and taps to provide the water. But when you work with them and tell them that and make them understand that actually water evolves in the forest, and therefore you need a good forest cover. So therefore, then you need the engineers and the foresters to sort of work together. So unless you can have specific collaborations between the governments, I don't think you can have community development to be, gauged as successful in any case. So even if you can't have a very broad-based coalition of all the government departments, I would suggest that at least for specific sector reform programs, be it in livelihoods or in water, any of the SDGs which Charlie had pointed out, for at least for the acceleration of the sustainable development goals, we must create a mechanism to orient the government officials. Yes. Thank you.
Could I just add to that to Kalyan? I worked for about 15 years at a national governmental level, and this is with the Scottish government. We talk in community development about structural change and systemic change, but we don't actually do much of it. We work at the grassroots level. Now, what I've always argued is that community development needs to look, and I don't mean this in a hierarchical sense, but perhaps it is, up as well as down. We need to look in our practice at the systems and the structures that are causing many of the problems that these disadvantaged and vulnerable communities face. So I felt in my career, and I know there are many others in academia, but also working within government, who've said, right, how can we actually try and help change the culture within government, change the systems, this siloed thinking, this discriminatory thinking within government, that it was absolutely vital that some of us in the community development field work at a governmental level, absolutely vital. So certainly one example, very, very briefly, that we were working on, this is 20 years ago now, was community planning in Scotland. It became very fashionable from the late 1990s, and we were pushing it hard. And I was responsible for a national training program for civil servants in different departments, and also for local authority officials from different departments, about how could we work together at a national, at a county, and at a neighborhood level. So it was at one level, it was about joined up government and all of that. But of course, the added value that we were bringing was, and that the communities themselves must be around the table, that they must have a voice around the table. Now, joined up government is easy to say. Holistic approaches is easy to say, and it's actually quite hard work. It is hard work to do it. But I did find that there were officials in all sorts of departments, in the civil service and in local authorities, from the transport department to the social services department, who understood these principles and wanted to do it. The difficulty was the design, the inherited design, which probably comes from Victorian imperialism or something, that has created these bureaucracies and ways in which we run governments and different agencies. But it's absolutely vital that we do work at that level as well, because we did impact on change. And I think higher education, our friends who work in academia, have a very vital role to play, working across different faculties to make sure that community development approaches and skills are adopted in engineering, in agriculture, rural development, not just in community work, absolutely, or social work. We have to work at a much more strategic level, trying to influence the other faculties. I know Sarah has been a champion of this for many, many years, and I certainly have, but we've nowhere near done enough of that, and we let our communities down as a result.
Thank you, Charlie, for this point of view. And I would like to give the microphone to Marlon Era from the Philippines.
Thank you very much. Good evening from the Philippines. Just a bit of introduction. I am Marlon Era. This is my first time joining this conference. I am now the Regional Trustee of Southeast Asia, just for your information. I'm very happy to engage in this conversation. My question is and comment is related to Sarah's comment. I think at the end of the day, what matters most is the improvement of the quality of life of people in the community. So my question is, what is the extent of the participation of the people in the research that you've been doing in a multidisciplinary way? When I say extent, maybe how their voices being heard. Food security is a very challenging issue, and how much time from being insecure to being secure, and in terms of having an access to water, to having a potable water supply. These are long-term goal, and how is the extent of the voices of people being heard in the multidisciplinary research conducted? I'm addressing it to any of the presenters. Thank you.
Thank you, Malone. I can try and address your question. It's a very important question that you are raising in terms of the involvement of the community members themselves. I think it was also raised in the previous presentation that sometimes communities are passive and certain decisions are done on their behalf because they don't necessarily take those decisions. It is, yes, it is quite true. It is a very lengthy process. It is quite unimaginable in terms of how one could actually get into the implementation and ensuring that indeed the community is food secure. But it has to go in stages, I believe, because even though you can have the pathway or the vision that says every household must have a food garden, for an example, and use small spaces in terms of actually building, growing food for themselves. It will not take everyone. So that is where, for instance, the skills of the people had to be identified. What is their passion? The asset-based community development approach is the one that becomes very helpful. And you take it step by step. One can deal with a certain section of a community so that you can pilot, and make a pilot to see to which extent has the participatory process actually been implemented, and it was yielding the results that are necessary. So one can say it is a very lengthy process. It needs commitment. That's why it's not a touch and go of people who can just come in and go. It needs people who are resident in the area. It also needs the stakeholder team that is very committed to what it is doing. And that in terms of even choosing the stakeholders, the recruitment process was such that if you are able to endure with the community for as long as the process entails. So it was those committed people who knew exactly that they have a passion for community development, and they've started it, even in terms of the NPOs that came in. Even in terms of the community members, it was people who are passionate about the development of their community. So you are able to see streams of people sometimes falling away because others come in and join. They think that there are immediate benefits. Some come in and they are so passive because they would imagine that they are going to gain something out of the process. And they find that there is nothing that is immediate in terms of gaining. So they slip away, and you are left with those people who are actually determined. So time will tell in terms of the determination and the commitment of the people to actually deliver or implement the actions or the pathways that have been identified. Thank you.
Thank you, Busisila, for your answer. And I can see Dominic Schlupoten from CBM. You turn on your camera. Maybe you want to ask some question.
Thank you. No, nothing in particular, except my appreciation for the presentations and ferocious agreement with the fact that we need to go multidisciplinary in the work we do. Thank you.
Yes, Kalin.
Yeah, Marlon, one of the ways of measuring, the rate of participation in the community, what we found is that for any community development program, like suppose it's water or forestry or what have you, so we expect the community to put in 10%, 10% of the total budget into a pool of funds. So when you get the community to, reach into their pockets and put in that contribution financially, you get them to own the whole program, so to say. And that's one way of measuring what is the level of participation of the community. Because if people are not, paying up front, then they're really not participating. They just want a freebie from the government. That's one way of measuring participation. There are other ways also, I'm sure. The other thing I wanted to just flag just for in half a minute is that, within a university, you have the Department of Physics and you have engineering, you have chemistry, you have various departments, and you have various professors who deal with students for those degrees, like a master's in chemistry or a master's in physics or what have you. Now, in the same university, we have the School of Community Development or Social Work. And so the vice chancellor of the university, his mind or her mind is used to just that phenomena of professors and students, dealing with each other. And they cut out the practitioners, because in this field, in this science, if I may call that, the science of community development, you need a very, very good mixture of course, professors who will provide the theoretical framework, but you need a good mixture of inviting the participation of practitioners from the field into those classrooms. And we don't seem to have that. And so the academia, my request to the academia is that they need to open up, think out of the box, so to say, and bring in community development practitioners, because the science of community development really requires equal participation of the practitioners along with the theoretical professors. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mcconnell. Thank you, dear friends. That was a very, very interesting discussion, very important questions. And it is really hard to close this session. And I want to encourage you to use the link in chat and to jump into Discord digital platform. So there we can proceed our contact, we can proceed the discussion. So we have the channel for join this channel and write a couple of words about first day of the conference, about this session in particularly. So let it be just the start for our endless connection on the base of community development and multidisciplinary approach in particular. So thank you for all the speakers of the conference of today's session, for all your questions and messages in chat. Thank you very much. So let's keep in touch, dear friends. We will wait you in Discord. Bye.